Hi, I'm Anne and welcome back to my channel. So I have been tagged in several different book tags over the last week, and I've also wanted to do one myself, and I realized that there is no way that I can take the time to do all these tags because I only post once a week, which means I only post 4 videos a month. So for me to do 3 book tags in a month is just not feasible because I want to do other types of videos, and at the end of each month or the beginning of the next month I always do a reading wrap up. So that post is set every single month, and so I only have 3 posts that are open, and I don't want to just have them all be book tags. I feel like that would be incredibly boring. So instead of doing 3 book tags over the next 3 months or something like that, I decided to just condense book tags and do 3 in one video. Okay, so I would leave down in the description timestamps so you can jump through different tags if you just want to watch one tag or something like that. This is going to be chaotic, and I'm going to keep my answers short so that this video doesn't go on forever. So the first tag I'm doing is the last 10 books book tag. This was created by Mark Nash, and I was tagged by Lady Jane Books. I just love Lady Jane Books. She reads a lot of horror and thriller, but she has a thought-provoking spin on her thoughts on different books, so I highly recommend her channel. I will link both of theirs in the description below. So, the questions. Number 1, the last book you didn't finish. And I do have an answer for this, even though I don't keep a record of the books that I DNF, especially the books that I DNF early on. But this one I actually own, and I DNF'd it just a couple days ago. So I can actually talk about it, and that is Idiots First by Bernard Malamud. This book I have had on my bookshelf for years, and I got it literally for the only reason that 1, the title really caught my eye, and 2, it was published in the 60s, so it's a pretty old book. And I finally said to myself, well, I should be reading it, finally. And this book is bizarre. It's kind of a collection of not associated short stories. Just the way this book treats things are just weird. So for example, the first story is about this father who's trying to get his disabled son on a train, and he's trying to get together the money to be able to afford the train. The second is about this man who is obsessed with a white man, might I say, who's obsessed with black people, and like he's obsessed with being around black people, but his obsession with them is just like creepy. So Idiots First is the first short story. The second one is Black is My Favorite Color. There's also some weird ones that the Jew bird, as in a Jewish person. So I don't know. I don't know if just these stories were bizarre to me and I was like, I'm not reading this. This is terrifying. So yeah. Last book I did not read. Number 2 is the last book you reread, which I look back on Goodreads because I don't remember rereading a book. I rarely reread books, and the last one I reread was all the way back in July of last year, and that is Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. I read this first when I was a kid, and I have been trying to do a reread of this series, but I'm currently still on the 3rd book, and I finished this like almost a year ago. So that tells you how horrible I'm doing in this reread. But yes, that was the most recent reread. Number 3, the last book that you bought. For this is a little hard because I have a whole stack of books that I recently bought from the Dollar Swap, which is this small bookstore I have in my town, which you can buy all these books for $1. But I picked out this one because I'm pretty sure this was the last one that I picked up off the shelf, and that is Dorothy Must Die by Danielle Page. So this book is pretty much a dark retelling of The Wizard of Oz, but Dorothy has taken over Oz, and this other girl is coming from our world to defeat Dorothy. She's also from Kansas, this other girl. And so I don't know much about it besides that, but I picked it up and I was like, I'm really curious to read this book. Number 4, the last book you said you read, but you didn't. So this is kind of a weird story because I thought about this and I thought, well, I don't think I've ever said I've read a book and I haven't read it. But then I realized that wasn't quite true. So when I was in school, right before the disease which shall not be named hit in March of 2020, I was in this class with this teacher. I love this teacher, and we were studying American history. And in it, we were talking about the Dust Bowl epidemic in the 1930s. And my teacher mentioned if any of us had heard of this book, The Grapes of Wrath, by John Steinbeck. You can't see fully because I have all these used stickers on it. I bought this at the Goodwill. And he asked, like, does anyone know what that's about? So I raised my hand because even though I hadn't read it, I knew what it was about. And so I explained to him what it was about. You know, this family is living in the Dust Bowl epidemic, and they have to travel to California to have a new start on life. And my teacher then went on to say, you know, how glad he was that, you know, people had read it in his class. And I felt so bad because I think he had assumed that I had read it just because I knew what it meant. And I didn't correct him because I was like, well, I don't want to. And then he went on to something else. So it's not like I really had time to correct him anyway. But I kind of felt bad for that instant because I was like, yes, I know what it's about, but I have never read it. So technically, I never said that I had read it, but yeah, I didn't like say, no, I didn't read it. I just know what it's about. Number 5, the last book you wrote in the margins of. I rarely do this, but I do have a relatively recent one that I did write. There's at least a couple like underlinings and margins that I wrote in this book. And this is King Leopold's Ghost by Adam Hochschild. It is a nonfiction about King Leopold and his rubber empire in the Congo, where he enslaved millions of Africans, and many ended up dying because of the horrific work arrangements in this place. So it's a nonfiction. I read it for my class last semester. I took a Africa in Bondage class, which was pretty much about African slavery. I rarely, if ever, write notes in the margins, but when I do, it is usually in books for school because I actually want to remember my thoughts. Also, I always write in pencil so I can erase it later if I want to, so that's the most recent one. Number 6, the last book you had signed. This was an easy choice because I don't get books signed ever, and if I do have signed books, it's usually from buying them from the Goodwill, and they just happen to be signed by the author. But I did meet one author, Caitlin Doughty. She is a YouTuber. She runs this mortician channel on YouTube, and she's written a couple books. This one is From Here to Eternity. It is a nonfiction book about different death traditions around the world. It's an interesting book. I had some issues with it, but I enjoyed it. But I had a chance to meet her back when I was living in Minnesota, and yeah, she was really cool. She came to a convention, and we went to a full day convention that was free at my local art museum, and it was so much fun. It was a blast going there, and she was the key speaker at it. And then after the day, she stayed and signed things, and she even signed my name. She was like, Anne. So yeah, she's the only author I've actually had sign my books. Number 7, the last book you lost. I have never, as far as I remember, have lost a book. I remember like my mom getting rid of books and then me wanting to keep them. Like that has happened several times, but no, I've never lost a book. And the same thing with number 8, the last book you had to replace. I've never had to replace a book. I do know that I probably had to get like second copies of certain books because I was required to read them in school, and they required a certain copy, and I had a different copy of that book, especially when it comes to classics. I'm probably going to need to do that this semester with my copy of War and Peace because my teacher requires a different copy, so I'll probably have to purchase that one. But I don't do it like to replace a book. Number 9, the last book you had an argument over. I don't really argue about books that much. I will say the last like argument I had that you could count as an argument is one I had with my boyfriend over Shadow and Bone, which is the first book of the Grisha trilogy. Or I just had debates with him over all of them, but it wasn't really an argument. It was just like a disagreement. I wasn't a massive fan of the first book, and he really loves the first book, so we just definitely went back and forth bantering about he arguing why he really liked it and me arguing why I really didn't like it. Number 10, the last book you couldn't get a hold of. For me, it would probably be books that are older, there aren't that many copies of them. But also one author that comes to mind that in general, I can't get a hold of pretty much most of his books. Keigo Higashino. He wrote Malice and Newcomer in this one series, the Detective Kaga series, I believe. And I read both those books and I absolutely loved them. But they are number 4 and number 8 in his Detective Kaga series, and because they are originally written in Japanese, only those 2 have been translated, so technically I probably could get a hold copies of them in Japanese, but they haven't been translated into English, so it wouldn't do me much good because I can't read Japanese. So those are like a whole series of books, and I think there's 10 total books in the series that I can't get a hold of. So just in general, there's a lot of like translated books or non-translated books that I'd love to read that author, but they haven't been translated into English. So that's like a big problem for me. So there is the last 10 books book tag, and now we are going on to the second book tag. The second book tag I'm doing is an ex-lurker tag, and it was created by Kate Luna. I will link her original video down in the description, and I was tagged by Gina Stanier. So sorry if I mispronounced your name. And she's just such a cute channel. I really love watching her, so I recommend, especially if you like cozy type books, watch her channel. I will link her down in the description as well. Number 1, what had been stopping or is stopping you from leaving comments or starting a booktube channel? Obviously, I'm not stopped from starting a booktube channel because I already started it, but I will say, you know, time is just a big reason that I don't do a lot of things. I just do not have time to do everything I want in my life because I like to stay busy, but I also have a lot of interests, so I can't possibly do them all at the same time. I watch so many videos on YouTube every day. There's no way I can comment on them all. So usually that's why I don't comment, especially on bigger YouTubers, because I know that my comment won't make that big a difference. Number 2, you've already left a bunch or a million of comments under BookTubers videos. Do you remember the very first comments you left? Did you get any reply? No, and I do know that just in general on YouTube, my first videos that I commented on were not booktubers. I remember commenting on a few travel channels, a few gaming channels. I watch a lot of varying channels on YouTube, but I will say the first like booktubers that I commented on are probably relatively recently. I really doubt I said anything besides like a great video or like some quirky comment that's like enjoyable to read. Number 3, pick a book which you read because of a booktuber's review. It has to stand out. Be the one you either loved or hated with passion. And I don't really have one for this because I did read a few books that were recommended to me that I enjoyed, but I won't say like any of them I absolutely loved. I'll give 2 examples. The first one is In Holidays by Christina Lauren. This was recommended on Holly by Golly Books, her YouTube channel. I'll link in the description. She just raved about how amazing the book was, and I was really curious to read it because it was around Christmas, so I read it in January, I think, so right after Christmas, and I enjoyed it. I gave it 3 stars, but it wasn't incredible. Same thing with A Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires by Grady Hendrix. This was recommended by Katrina Brown. Again, I will link her channel down below, and she, again, I commented on one of her videos and I said how much I loved Horror Store by Grady Hendrix, and she was like, you need to read this book. It is an amazing book. So I read it and I enjoyed it. I gave it, again, 3 stars. So it's not like it was my favorite book, but yeah, usually when booktubers rave about like how amazing a book is, usually I at least like it. It's not like I hate it. Number 4, tell us a bit about the book you're currently reading. Is it any good? Could you read a passage from it which you loved or found ridiculous? So I'm currently reading Austenland by Sharon Hale. It is a story of this woman, Jane, who is obsessed with Jane Austen, especially Pride and Prejudice, Mr. Darcy, the Colin Firth and Jennifer Ely one, and she's just obsessed. She ends up having her aunt pass away and give her this round trip to this couple-week retreat where they pretend to be from Jane Austen's era. There's a ball, there's romance. They made a movie of it a few years ago, and I loved the movie so much. It was so absurd, so ridiculous, but it was still amazing. And it was also called Austenland, and I loved it. So that's why I picked up this book. Finally, it's been on my TBR for a while, and I'm reading it now. So I'm only like 11% in, but here, I'll read you like the first passage because it is a spoof on the beginning of Pride and Prejudice. It is a truth universally acknowledged that a 30-something woman in possession of a satisfying career and fabulous hairdo must be in want of very little, and Jane Hayes, pretty enough and clever enough, was certainly thought to have little to distress her. I just love how it introduces us to the main character while also spoofing Jane Austen. It's just, I really Number 5, do you keep a reading journal? And no, I don't, unless you count Goodreads. I guess that would be my reading journal because I always rate books I read as well as just leave a short review, even if it is just like a paragraph review for myself to look back on like a year or two later, because oftentimes I have a horrible memory, so I would not remember books that I read a year ago. But besides that, I don't really keep a reading diary of any sort. I do keep a list of TBR books in a physical journal I have of books I want to read that I cross out when I read them, but I don't keep a reading journal. All right, and there is the second tag. The third tag is the only one I technically wasn't tagged in, and that is the Universes Collide tag, and it was created by Mason in the Dark. Again, I'll link his channel down below. I saw it on BookBud's channel, and they said in the comments that I should consider myself tagged when I was like, this is so much fun. So I decided to do it even though I wasn't technically tagged by them. Number 1, the switch up. Choose 2 protagonists from different series that you would like to see swap. I am going to switch Katniss from The Hunger Games with Thomas from The Maze Runner. And here's the reason I'm going to do this, because 1, it's both similar enough worlds where I feel like they would both be able to survive in each world. However, the 2 characters themselves could not be more different. Katniss is kind of someone who just goes along with everything. She's kind of just like forced into situations, whereas with Thomas, he really pushes the narrative forward. I really loved his character compared to hers because I just felt like she was more of a passive protagonist. But I'm curious, because of the situations in their world, like how would it change if Thomas was trying to survive in the Hunger Games and he had volunteered to be in the Hunger Games to save his younger sister instead of Katniss? But also, like, what would it be if Katniss was sent into the Glade and had to survive with these group of boys and later one girl and had to, like, decide to be a runner or not? Because I don't know if she would be able to. I'd just be curious to see what, knowing how different their personalities are, what kind of decisions each of them would make if they were in, you know, an opposite situation. Number 2. V is for villainy. Choose a villain you would like to see get their own story. For that, I'm going to pick a book that I read recently, and that is Sauron from Lord of the Rings. I just think that Sauron, because we get a little bit of hints of where he came from and how he was polluted by the power of the ring, but we don't learn that much about him. So I feel like having an origin story or something of how he was consumed by darkness and evil would be really cool. Number 3, the adaptation. Choose a character you would like to see get novelized. Okay, I did so much research on this question because I kept thinking of movies and like characters in movies that I was like, oh, I'd love to see get novels made of them, but then I realized that most of them already were from novels. So my first thought was Indiana Jones, because I was like, that would be a really cool adventure series, but then I looked it up and they do have like a kids or YA type series adventures by him. So I was like, okay, I can't really pick that. So I decided to go with not a movie character, but a video game character. And I decided to go with Nathan Drake from Uncharted. So Nathan Drake is similar to, if you've seen any of the Tomb Raider, Lara Croft movies, he's like a male equivalent of Lara Croft. He is an adventurer who goes out and finds treasures and, you know, deals with history and ancient ruins. And I love the Uncharted games so much. And unlike Lara Croft, they haven't made any live action movies about him, and I just feel it's about time, okay? I want to see this happen. I want to see books about him. He's really underrated, okay? Number 4, the crossover. Choose 2 characters from different universes you would like to see interact. And I thought about this for a while, and I just decided to go with my first impulse, which is kind of weird, and that is I would have Peter Pan from, of course, Peter and Wendy, and Dumbledore from Harry Potter meet. And my reasoning is Peter Pan is all about youth and staying young and not being very wise and adult. Whereas Dumbledore, and just in general the wise mentor figure like that, people like Dumbledore are all about the wisdom. They're older, they have lived a lot and have experiences, and they're kind of teaching the younger characters, the protagonists, to be better people and to be able to deal with their situations better. So I feel like him and Peter Pan having a conversation would be fascinating, because Peter Pan would just be so immature and Dumbledore would be kind of so wise, and then they'd just be like conflicting over that. I don't know. I love conflict. Number 5, tonal shift. Choose a story to give a different tone or genre to. So there's a lot of like very dark books out there that I feel like would be hilarious with a comedic spin to them. And the first one that came to mind, well, in general, just anything by Stephen King, but the first one which came to mind in particular was It by Stephen King, because it's about a clown, which is kind of inherently funny. And even though the book, and I never finished the book, I only got halfway through, but the book is very serious, very darker tones, but there's also this lighter feel to it too, because you have this group of children having this friendship, and that is a little bit lighter. And then you have this ridiculous Pennywise who's a clown that's jumping everywhere and is ridiculous. So I feel like if you up that and turned it from a horror purely into a horror comedy, I think that would be amazing. So there are the 3 tags. I am putting timestamps, so if you only want to watch like one tag, go ahead. Feel free. Thank you for everyone who tagged me. As usual, I'm not going to tag anybody, but if you'd like to do this tag, I'd love to hear your answers for any of these tags. So if you want to consider yourself tagged after watching this video, you are now tagged, okay? Thank you so much for watching. And if you liked this video, like, subscribe. I post every Saturday at 6 p.m. and I will see you all in the next video. Bye.